The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hello everyone. We're going to get started. I want to thank you all for joining us today for our Chapter Leader News webinar on annual meetings and elections. My name is Amanda Sharp, and I am the Chapter and Partner Relations Coordinator at NACE National. We welcome questions today, and you can submit them through the questions or chat panel of this GoToWebinar. We are also recording the presentation today. You will be able to access it and past recordings in the Chapter Leader Resources Library on the NACE National website. Please reach out if you have any issues accessing the Chapter Leader resources. I'd like to get started and welcome Lisa Kruth, our 2019 CLC Chair, and Karen Tucker, our 2020 CLC Chair. Welcome, ladies.
Hi everyone, thank you guys again so much for attending. We're excited that we have so many attendees today. Like Amanda said, with me today is Karen Tucker, your current CLC Vice Chair and your 2020 CLC Chair. We are going to go ahead and get started so we make great use of everyone's time. Let's go to if you have questions, you will see in the sidebar that there are 5 handouts today. The 2019 chapter elections kit will be emailed out at the conclusion of today's webinar. All of the handouts will be part of today's email that goes out, so you'll have the sample questions, the sample reporting template. All of those will be part of the email that goes out today, but we most importantly wanted to get the elections kit out to you so that you can start getting your nominations committee together and get your call for candidates done so that you guys are ready for your elections. Most chapters have those in October and November, so we wanted to get these out earlier for you guys so you guys can be in compliance with the bylaws. The elections kit is based on the chapter bylaws, and it serves as a general guideline and helps you with best practices to assist you with your election procedures. Next slide. Next slide. This is a sample elections calendar. Right now, for those of you who have October elections dates, this is a great month to get your nominations committee formed. The nominations committee is a requirement. When we revised the chapter bylaws in 2018, the nominations committee and the guidelines for elections were definitely clarified with specific dates in terms of when you need to send those call for nominations out, when your nominations committee starts needing to submit candidates for your board of directors. Your immediate past president or a past board member should serve as the chair of your nominating committee. Your nominating committee is a requirement. It's not optional. You do have to have a nominating committee. And you also need to make sure your nominations committee signs a confidentiality, conflict of interest policy, and abides by your code of ethics. If your elections are in September, you should be sending out an email to your chapter members with the forms, the calendar, and your official election announcement must take place at least 30 days prior to your chapter election. So if you're sending out your call for candidates and your nominating committee is nominating people, you need to send an email to your chapters. If your program is October 15th, you need to send that out by September 15th in order to be in compliance with your bylaws. So that's why we're saying you guys have some time to be able to get that done in terms of getting all of your call for candidates and your nominating committees forms done. Most chapters are doing their annual meetings in conjunction with their elections. If that's what you're doing, one of the things that I recommend is that when you send out your call for candidates, that you let everybody know that your chapter election and annual meeting will happen on X date, and that way you are in compliance with your bylaws, because that has to be announced at least 30 days in advance per your chapter bylaws. I know this is a lot to process, and that's why we're doing this sample calendar for you. This is part of the chapter elections kit. Certainly reach out to me, your CLC mentor, or Amanda or Kathy at National if you have any questions in regards to your elections. This is the second year that we have done it this way, so hopefully it's a little bit easier this year for everyone in terms of elections. Once you have your elections and you've announced your results to your members, please make sure that you send the election results to NACE National so that we can make sure that once your new officers or directors take office, that we have all the correct information. And then most chapters have their newly elected officers or directors start January 1st of the following year. Do you have any questions on the sample calendar? If you do, please feel free to submit them through the chat window. Any questions so far, Amanda?
The only question that they have is, does NACE National have a conflict of interest template?
We do. I will get that over to Amanda, and when we send out the elections kit, I will have her include that, and then we'll also make that available on the chapter leader resource guide on the NACE National website, which does require a login, but we have a lot of resources available there for you guys on all kinds of topics. Next slide. So elections per your bylaws. Most of the chapter bylaws did not change in terms of these specific bylaw clauses. So at least 1 month prior to your chapter's election meetings, the secretary needs to circulate to the membership an elections announcement along with the nominations committee's list of potential candidates up for election. If you are not electing your executive board this time, then you need to update that particular section of the chapter elections kit, depending on if you're electing executive board or directors. Some people do all the elections in 1 year. Some people do odd and even years, executive board and director level in case. That way the whole board doesn't transition at the same time. And per your bylaws, your annual meeting and your election should take place at the same time. And then you're going to list all the electable positions. That, again, is part of the chapter elections kit. Any questions on this? Next slide. So per your bylaws, a simple majority vote of the certified voting members present at the meeting shall be necessary to approve the candidates as described, providing a quorum is present. At the annual meeting, the certified voting members shall elect persons to the following positions should those be open for election. In section 4.5 of your chapter bylaws, it is going to specify what your particular chapter's schedule of elections is. This is pulled from a sample chapter bylaw. I wanted you guys to see how it reads if you do odd and even years in terms of officers and directors. All candidates for elections must be NACE professional members in good standing, as defined in the NACE National Bylaws, Section 4.4, and meet the following additional eligibility requirements, as well as any requirements of this Article 7 and any position descriptions prepared by the chapter board in accordance with this Article 8.2.c. So basically what you need to do is review your chapter bylaws and your job description, position descriptions, and make sure that to disseminate that information as part of your chapter elections announcements so that your members are aware of what the requirements are, what the position entails, what each position is responsible for, so that everybody has a great frame of reference when they're running for a board position. Next slide.
There's just one question. Is absentee voting allowed?
So absentee voting is allowed. The only sort of hiccup when it comes to absentee voting is the only way to do that is to have the ballots, completed ballots, sent to the nominating committee or the chair of the nominating committee, which is typically your immediate past president or a past member of your board. The only challenge with absentee ballots is there's no way to keep those anonymous because typically they're associated with an email address. You have to have some way to verify that that absentee ballot is coming from a member in good standing. Whereas when you do a voting at your meeting, you know that you're checking in a member in good standing, giving that person a ballot. So you can certainly do absentee voting if there's just no way to keep those confident or anonymous. Any other questions? Voting members.
One question is, are
Yes.
you required to offer absentee? Oh, that was the same question. Yeah, so I believe that was answered about the absentee. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Voting members are professional members in good standing whose chapter membership is designated as this chapter. A designated chapter leader, probably somebody from your nominating committee or your judges and teller committee. At least 1 week prior, 7 days prior to your elections, that roster of your chapter will be your available pool of certified voting members. So 1 week before your elections, you need to pull a roster, and that is the roster that you will use to certify your members so that when people register for your meeting and come, they have, you can verify that they're members and they are the ones that get to vote. Each member has only 1 vote to cast. The quorum for the annual meeting is a majority of the voting members present at that meeting. So if you have 100 members present at the voting members present at the meeting and somebody wins 51 to 49, the majority is the 51 because that means you have a quorum of the members present at the meeting. It's not necessarily a quorum of your entire membership. It's the majority of the voting members actually present at the meeting. If you do decide to do absentee ballots and you can verify that that came from a member in good standing, that vote can count towards the quorum count. Any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple going back to the absentee voting.
Yeah.
Are the chapters required to offer absentee voting?
No.
Okay. And then the
No,
other,
only because some chapters feel like because it's not anonymous, they want to be able to keep the elections process anonymous. And if you want to be part of the elections process, you have to show up to the meeting. It's definitely not required. Some chapters don't feel like it complicates the process versus there's sort of a cost-benefit analysis. If it complicates the process, some chapters don't want to do it. It's all of the members that are present at the meeting. Those are the only people that get to vote. It's kind of like when you vote in your local election, you actually have to go or send in your ballot ahead of time. But you know, you have to go vote. So it is part of the benefit of being a member is that you do have a say in your chapter elections. What other absentee questions do we have?
we have another question, which is for the point that no one should serve more than 2 years in a position, is that applied to the executive board members versus the appointed board of directors?
10 years, you mean?
Yes.
So you can look at that one of two ways. Some chapters have that and you can't serve more than 10 years on the board, period. Some chapters started their 10-year calendar over when we redid the bylaws last year. If you have a specific question about how that works in your chapter, please reach out to either myself or your CLC mentor and we can help you navigate through how that works with your particular chapter.
Okay, and then do more than half of all members need to be at the voting meeting in order to have a quorum?
No, it's half of all the members present at the meeting.
So another question about that is, so we don't need to have a majority of total membership, just some.
Correct.
Yeah. And then we have one more that just wants to clarify who is a professional member versus a young professional.
Young professional members are considered part of the professional membership. They are a subset of the professional membership. So basically, according to the national bylaws, the only membership category that is not allowed to vote are students. Students do not have a vote in the professional chapter. Professionals, young professionals, it doesn't really matter what your membership category is, if you're a nonprofit or if you're a legacy member, all of those people still have voting rights. It's just the professional members, that includes young professionals, that includes everything but students.
Okay, and that also, does it matter whether they're primary or secondary memberships?
Primary membership.
Mm-hmm.
Primary membership must be designated as the chapter they're voting in order for their vote to count. So if you have some members who have designated your chapter as a secondary chapter, it's their primary chapter that they're able to vote in.
Perfect. So that is all the questions we have so far.
Okay, perfect. Next slide. All right, yes, a nominations committee is required. I know everybody loves this requirement, but what this does, the nominating committee is a required best practice to ensure your candidate qualifications are reviewed and there is transparency and consistency in the chapter elections process. You don't want as a chapter leader, you don't want there to be, in terms of optics, you want your chapter to have everything above board. You want there to be someone who is not associated with the board or with the chapter leadership overseeing your elections. Yes, your immediate past president is part of that, is the chair of that committee, but they don't have a dog in that fight, so to speak. They're not part of the slate or the present the candidates that are up for elections. They're simply facilitators for the process, and what I would recommend is that you have at least 3 people on your nominating committee, just so that, again, in terms of transparency and consistency, you keep the process fair and open to all your members. The Nominations Committee is a committee of the chapter and provides for the board's effectiveness and continuing development. The immediate past president or a past board member shall serve as the chair of this committee and may choose to have up to 3 additional committee members. My recommendation, 3 is a really good number. You can have 4, but I would try to get at least 3, including your immediate past president as the chair of the nominating committee. Any questions on the nominations committee?
Yeah, for a new chapter, should the outgoing president be the committee chair, since we do not have an immediate past president? So,
and that person is not going to be one of the candidates that is up for election? Then I would say yes.
No.
Also, you can certainly ask your chapter CLC mentor to help serve or help guide the outgoing president in the nominations committee. I'm certainly happy to help that particular chapter with their elections facilitation as well, if that helps. Any other questions? Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Election judges and tellers are also required. You need to have a judge and 2 tellers, none of whom shall be a candidate for office or a certified delegate or be assigned a certified proxy to process and certify the elections. The judges and tellers must be professional members in good standing and appointed. So basically your judges and tellers, for those of you that attended, experienced, and are part of the national board elections, we have a judge and teller committee, and basically your judges and tellers aren't in any way associated with the election. They are past leaders who, in the interest of transparency and consistency, help count ballots and certify the elections. Most chapters do not allow voting by proxy, and I recommend that you do not. I would rather see you guys do absentee ballots before you do proxies. Any questions? All right, moving on. The judges and tellers, so the tellers will collect and count the ballots and will record the results of the election, and then the judges and tellers will certify and report the results of the election to the chair of the nominations committee, who will be responsible for announcing the results to the members present at the meeting. Any questions concerning this result? The results shall be made at this time. If there are no questions, the results will be accepted and the vote will be declared valid. Should the vote be taken electronically, any questions must be submitted to the chair of the nominating committee within 24 hours of the vote. Once all questions are answered and resolved, the vote can be declared valid. There are a few chapters who have invested in electronic balloting, which is associated with members' email addresses, but is completely anonymous. It's definitely not required. I would say 99% of our chapters are still doing paper ballots that are anonymous. And basically how you're going to do that is you're going to make up ballots, and once a member checks in at the meeting, they get a ballot without any name, without any identifying information. It's basically just a vote. And then you need to keep track of how many ballots go out and how many ballots come back in, because you can't have more ballots come back in than you handed out. And not everybody's going to turn their ballots in, and that's okay, but at least you know you gave out 75 ballots and 74 came back in, that means one person didn't turn it in, and that's okay. But you aren't going to have 76 ballots. Any questions here?
Yeah, for the smaller chapter, they don't have enough members to have judges and tellers. Often we only have 5 to 10 people at the election. So what's the recommendation when it comes to that?
So it is definitely something that is required. What I would recommend is that you reach out to some past leaders to see if they would be willing to serve as your judge and tellers for this. You need at least 1 judge and 2 tellers for your elections. If you can only get a judge and 1 teller, that's fine too, because again, if you're only counting 15 ballots, I think that's probably okay.
And then the other question is, can the judge or tellers be part of the nominating committee, or must they be separate?
There's nothing specifically prohibiting that, and some chapters do use the same leaders because as part of the nominating committee, they've been involved in the nominations process, and a lot of times those are past leaders who have been very involved. And again, you just want to make sure that everything is transparent. If that's what you're doing, make sure your membership is aware of who your judges and tellers are going to be, and that they were part of the nominating committee as well. I feel like that's a little bit of a conflict of interest, only because if you have somebody from the nominating committee who nominated their BFF to be on the board, and then they're counting ballots, it could be viewed as a conflict of interest. You want to, in every way, avoid conflict of interest. So if that is something that's going to happen, please make sure that that is disclosed on the conflict of interest form. Please make sure that your membership is aware that that is happening, that somebody from your nominating committee is also an election judge or an election teller. I, again, feel like that could be viewed by a member as a conflict of interest.
Okay, and then can the outgoing president, if not up for another position, be a judge or a teller?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then I just want to make a note really quick that I know some chapters in your roster, you cannot see whether the member is primary or secondary. So I will be emailing everyone by the end of this week, letting you know who from your chapter is a secondary member, whether it's a business partner, corporate member, any of that. So I will be emailing the entire chapter with that information.
Thank you for that, Amanda. Appreciate that attention to detail. These are really great questions, you guys. I'm really, really impressed with the amount of questions we're getting, and I really, really hope that this process is helpful to you guys. If you have any other questions that we didn't address as part of this, please, again, feel free to reach out to me or to Karen Tucker or to your CLC mentor for your chapter. We are here as a resource for you. We can help you work through any of these judges and tellers, nominating committee challenges that you guys have. That is what we're here for. We can find a solution for your particular chapter. Let's move on to the next slide. Uncontested races. I know that it seems like you shouldn't have to have an election if there are no contested races. Your members still need to be part of the voting process. You still need to get your members in the habit of voting every time there's an election, because at some point you will have a contested race in your chapter. Contested races, in my opinion, are a good thing because your members then have a say in who represents them on the board. But even if you don't have any contested races, you still need to hold an election and allow your members to vote. Your member voice matters, so you still need to have an election, even if there are no contested races. Any questions?
So they still need to put ballots together. If their chapter is not changing from 2019 to 2020, they just need to at least have ballots.
If your chapter bylaws say that you only have to have an election every other year because that's the schedule that your board is elected on, and you, I do think that, well, you know what? I am not sure there. I will find out and get back to you because I don't know the answer to that. I would assume that if your bylaws say your board is only elected every other year and this is not an election year for you, then I don't think you have to have an election if, per your chapter bylaws, your elections only happen every other year. I will find out and get back to you. I am making myself a note. All right, moving on to the super exciting topic of annual meetings that, yes, are required. Chapter bylaws, Article 3, meeting of the NACE members. Annual meeting, Section 3.1. The members of the chapter shall hold an annual election and or business meeting of the NACE members between October 1st and October 31st. See your particular chapter bylaws to determine when your annual meeting needs to happen. And it typically is in conjunction with your election, so you can handle all your NACE business and your elections during that meeting. So even if you don't have to have elections because of your chapter bylaws say that you only have to do that every other year, you still have to have an annual meeting. The president or the board of directors of a chapter of NACE may call special meetings of NACE for any purpose. Notice of a special meeting shall be given in the same manner as for the annual meeting, except that is also to specify the purpose of the meeting, and only 14 days notice shall be necessary. So for your annual meeting, what I would recommend is that you send that out. Just because it's typically part of your elections, you need to send that out 30 days prior to your annual meeting. And your annual meeting, again, if you have ever attended Experience Conference and attended the NACE annual meeting, it is something where we report on the progress of the association. You're going to report on the progress of your chapter, where you stand financially, what your membership counts are, what your bank balance is. Yes, you have to disclose what your bank balance is. I understand that some chapters don't want to do that, but it's not the board's money. That money belongs to your members, and they have a right to know how much money the chapter has in its coffers. And we have some sample questions for you to be prepared for in terms of where you stand with your bank balance, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's go to the next slide.
One quick question. Can non-members be present during the annual meeting if it is held?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Some chapters do a annual meeting and election if they're doing it in conjunction with another program. They do a members only section of that particular meeting where the annual meeting and elections take place, and then they do networking and a speaker or whatever they're doing. Some chapters, it's open. We don't have anything to hide. Again, we are a strategic, transparent organization from NACE National down to our chapter levels. We have nothing to hide. So yes, if you want to allow non-members to attend, absolutely. If you don't, that's fine too. You don't have to allow non-members to attend, but there's no problem with non-members attending. All right, next slide. You do have to, in your notice of your annual meeting, disclose the agenda of your annual meeting. And what I would say is, we have a sample agenda coming up. As it's also one of the handouts. The president presides as the chair of all meetings of the membership. In the absence of the president, the vice president of education or vice president of membership still serve as the temporary chair. In regards to section 3.4, you need to check in your bylaws as to what it says for your particular chapter. This is one of those sections of the bylaws that the chapters were able to customize. So please read your bylaws and make sure that you are in compliance in terms of who is going to be the chair of the annual meeting. One of your regular meetings shall be in conjunction with the annual membership meeting. So again, this is all in your bylaws. It is required. You have to do an annual meeting. Any questions? Moving on.
One quick question. Do we need to email out the agenda of the annual meeting to the membership prior to the actual meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you do need to let your membership know what the agenda is in terms of, especially if you're doing it in conjunction with your elections, you need to specify, okay, 5:30 networking, 6 o'clock elections and candidate speeches. We'll review an annual meeting agenda sample here coming up. Next slide. And here we are, sample agenda. Registration, meeting officially called to order. Chapter president will go over the order of business, presentation of chapter financials, address from the candidates, candidate Q&A, and then you give everybody an opportunity to turn in their ballots. Ballots will be tallied by the judges and tellers during the chapter business meeting. Results are certified by the election judge. Some chapters review NACE National Strategic Plan and highlight their chapter accomplishments. NACE member Q&A, only members in good standing may ask questions of the board regarding the chapter. Members must observe the rules of decorum and not disrupt the meeting. Robert's rules will be followed. Questions must come from NACE members in good standing only. Please make sure that everyone who attends understands that. If they're not a NACE member, they cannot address the board during the meeting because they technically don't have a standing at that meeting. Once your votes have been tallied and certified, you can announce your elections results. You can also do committee recruitment announcements and then adjournment. Minutes of your annual meeting must be posted online under a members only section within 14 days of your annual meeting. And your annual meeting agenda should be included with the meeting notice distributed to your membership. Any questions here? Some chapters are choosing to, in terms of the minutes from the annual meeting, some chapters are choosing to email that out specifically to members only, just in terms of, in the interest of transparency, they're just choosing to email those minutes for that particular annual meeting out to their membership. This is a sample report that we used on this webinar last year. This is from the Houston chapter in terms of what they disclosed. They were reporting in October of 2018 for calendar year 2017. Some chapters are choosing to do year to date, so they're doing January 1st through September 30th for an October meeting. Some chapters are choosing to report the year prior. When we go to NACE National and you experience and you guys sit through the annual meeting with the national board, they're reporting prior year. They're not reporting year to date. They're reporting prior year because you've filed a tax return for that year by this point. So those financials are accurate. Some chapters who report year to date aren't necessarily, they're reporting their actuals for the year. So it is totally up to you how you want to report, but your report do need to include income, expenses, what your profit and loss looks like, what your bank balance is, what your member count is, what your annual program attendance is. These are things that you guys as a board should know, and you want to see this particular chapter had a 12.5% increase in program attendance year over year. That's great progress. That's something that you can use, because I know you guys are all looking at this when you are submitting your chapter of the year awards. You can say, based on our annual meeting, we had a 12.5% increase in annual program attendance. Those are things that to highlight. These are just examples of what you guys should be looking at in terms of reporting to your members. The more transparent you can be, the better off. Any questions in regards to this report? It is in the handouts for today. If you have any questions, we are certainly happy to help you kind of figure out these numbers.
There is one question in regard, just going back to the annual meeting and voting at the annual meeting.
Sure.
They're just wondering if it's best practice to separate seating for both sections, to have one to ask questions and one for non-members.
I would, absolutely, because then it becomes very clear who is allowed to ask questions. If you have everyone mixed together, when somebody raises their hand, if the president doesn't have every single member on their roster memorized, you have the potential to allow a non-member to ask a question. So I would absolutely separate members and non-members in terms of audience seating for this, so that you can make sure that everyone that's asking a question is an actual member. Any other questions there? Perfect. Sample questions that you need to be prepared for. Questions from the audience must come from NACE members in good standing only. Just like we just had a question come across that I don't know the answer to. I am going to find out because I don't know. And that's okay. If somebody from your membership asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, say that. Say, I'm not sure. I will find out and we will get back to you. And that particular Q&A item should be emailed out to the entire membership when you, just so that it's clear. Again, in the interest of transparency, if somebody asks you a question at that meeting that you don't have an answer to, you need to share that, not just with that particular member, but with the attendees at that meeting or your entire membership, whichever you feel is more appropriate. I would try to be as prepared for these kinds of questions as you possibly can, but somebody may ask something that you're not familiar with, and you'll find out and get back to them, and that's okay. We have had a couple of situations where a particular member has had specific questions on specific chapter budget line items. What I would recommend is that you ask that member to speak privately to their treasurer, or request to set up a meeting with that member to go over specific budget line items, or invite that person to attend a board meeting where their question is specifically addressed on the agenda, and then they are excused for the remainder of the meeting, unless they're signing a confidentiality agreement. If you have a member who is questioning your bank balance or what you're spending money on, my recommendation in situations like that is to have a second board member present with the chapter treasurer to go over those financials. And then, just to make sure that there's no, again, in the interest of transparency, let's CYA if that makes sense. Any questions here?
So,
all right, moving on. Oh, just kidding.
One of the smaller chapters asks, is it common for non-members to attend the annual meeting?
So because you're sending out your agenda in advance and they know you're doing elections and they can't vote, and they know you're doing an annual meeting where they can't ask questions, some chapters have non-members attend just simply for the networking. But a lot of times at these meetings, it's mostly just members. Speaking from my own experience in chapter leadership, our elections meeting was typically just members. There were some student members who attended. They just wanted to be part of the process and kind of look at how that process went. So from a governance perspective, they could learn how to do that and just kind of be part of the process. But it's typically not a hugely attractive meeting for non-members to attend. It's not prohibited. You certainly can allow it, but I would assume that a whole bunch of non-members are not going to be there.
Okay, and then
any other questions?
Yeah, so we have a couple more. Are all board members required to attend the annual meeting?
I would certainly hope that every single member of your board would be there, yes. As a show of solidarity, you know, board members can only miss a certain percentage of meetings per your chapter bylaws. And I would hope that your entire board would stand up on that stage as a solid team to show support for your chapter. Absolutely.
And then we have one more question, which is, if we have a member who is aggressively scrutinizing the expenditures, should we answer the question or should we direct them to inquire with National?
I would say, in the interest of transparency, if you need some assistance dealing with that particular member and the challenge that you're having with that particular member, National is certainly happy to help you. Me as the CLC chair, Karen as the CLC vice chair, your CLC mentor can certainly help your particular chapter walk through that, that situation. Speaking from my own experience in a chapter leadership role, we did have something very similar happen, and it just got to the point where we weren't able to answer that question. It just was, I can't give you the information you're looking for because I don't have it. Here's what where our income is, what our expenses are. You're welcome to go through, you know, our monthly P&L. We have those for the last 2 years. Tell me what it is you're looking for and I'll try to help answer it for you. But, you know, in terms of criticism or questions about how you're running your chapter financially, you know, unless your chapter is a hot mess financially, you may just have a member with an agenda in terms of trying to be critical of your chapter. If you want to reach out to me, you know, kind of offline, I can certainly help you walk through that particular challenge. Next slide. Annual meeting best practices. Again, questions from the audience are from NACE members in good standing only. Oh, we've already done this one, I'm sorry. Next slide. All right. These are things that you should prepare for in your report. If your program attendance is up or down, to what do you attribute our attendance going up 12.5%? If your attendance is down, why is chapter program attendance down? Be prepared to answer that question. Why are membership levels up or down? Be prepared to answer why people should join. Why should people pay the $3.95 when they can just get the guest rate? And the best answer for something like this is a chapter's best source for increasing membership is existing member referrals. Plus, you get $50 off of membership for each referral that you give. You know, if your chapter is going through some growing pains or some challenges in terms of membership levels, that's okay. Maybe maybe there's a unique challenge in your market that you're experiencing. Again, be transparent. Talk about some of these questions at your board meeting prior to your annual meeting, so that you guys as a board are prepared to answer these kinds of questions. If you need help with any of the questions that are posed here, and you need a specific point addressed for your particular chapter, again, please feel free to reach out to me or to Karen or to your CLC mentor or to Amanda and Kathy at NACE National. We are all here as resources for you and can certainly help you navigate through any particular idiosyncrasies with your chapter. What goals do the chapter leaders have for next year to improve things with our chapter? You guys should be able to speak strategically what your plans are for next year in terms of programming, membership growth, anything of those natures. Also, please let your membership know that you have a retreat coming up. And that's where you do your strategic planning for the following year. If there's something that the membership wants to see, now is the time for you guys to give the feedback, because your board hasn't had its retreat yet. So you can incorporate some of those things that your membership are looking for into your retreat, so you know how to plan for the following year. Additionally, if you have yet to ask for a strategic planning session for your chapter, please reach out to Kathy Horner at NACE National. She does strategic planning with chapters. There have been a few chapters that have taken advantage of that. It's a really great opportunity to set some strategic goals for your chapter, to get really strategic in terms of your governance and your outlook on your chapter. If you haven't done it, I would highly recommend it. Be prepared to answer financial questions. It's your members' money. They have a right to question where you are as a chapter financially. If you're budgeted to make money, if you're budgeted to lose money, whatever that is, your budget should be finalized and voted on at your retreat, but has to be approved by December 20th per your chapter bylaws. And then again, if you're budgeted to make money, it's because we anticipate our fundraiser is going to raise X, Y, or Z. Or we don't anticipate having to spend as much money on speakers next year because we've, gotten some really great deals on speaker fees, and we have some great programming planned, and it's just not going to cost us as much money next year. It's if you're budgeted to lose money, you are reinvesting in your chapter. So next year might be a down year, and that's okay, as long as you have, I wouldn't budget to lose money, only because it doesn't look very good, and it means that you probably need to evaluate some of the things in your chapter budget in terms of expenses to offset that loss. So if you have budget questions for your chapter, please let me know, or let your CLC know, and we can again walk you through some challenges you have there if you have any. Do we have any questions, Amanda?
No, we're going to move right along.
Okay, perfect. Highlight what you're doing as a chapter to reinvest in your membership. Focus on your chapter strategic plans, growth, and membership investments. High quality program education speakers, scholarships for CPCEs, scholarships for experience, scholarships for your leaders to go to evolve so that they can learn to be better leaders. Highlight all of those reinvestments into your chapter. If your members have questions about your bank balance, chapters with larger reserves typically tend to spend more on speakers, and also chapters need financial reserves to pay venue deposits, speaker fees, cover speaker travel, cover administration expenses like website fees, some of those kinds of things. Chapters with smaller reserves need to highlight the fact that they need to increase program attendance and membership numbers to increase revenues and reserves, which then will allow us to fund better speakers, more programs, more scholarships, etc. Chapter program pricing, if that comes up as a question, why do we pay so much for meetings? If your chapter is considering a pricing increase, address that. And that's simply, venue, catering, food and beverage costs continue to increase. You certainly don't want to be in a position where you're being unfair to your members that you're asking to sponsor or give you X rate for your meetings. You want to be fair to ensure that you're presenting quality venues with great food and beverage options for your memberships at your chapter programs. Let's move on. Next slide.
One quick question. Are you supposed to have completed the next year's budget by this meeting? Or I thought you were supposed to.
No, your budget per your chapter bylaws needs to be voted on and finalized by December 20th. And that's why I'm saying in terms of if your members have questions about your financials for 2020, like what you're planning on, please let them know that you'll be finalizing your budget by December 20th at your retreat, because that'll give you an opportunity to have the people that were just elected part of the discussion and the strategic plan for the chapter for the following year. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Any other questions that we can answer for you?
Please remember, you can always submit questions to me after the fact, and we'll get them answered. I will post that onto the chapter leader Facebook page and any other place if there are any additional questions. But right now we don't.
Sure, absolutely, and certainly, again, please reach out to me or to your chapter CLC mentor, to Karen Tucker. She's the CLC vice chair. We can certainly help any chapters that have unique challenges or unique situations in terms of chapter financials and items that they're reporting on to their membership. It sounds scary and intimidating, but it shouldn't be. We require this now from our chapters just to be the most strategic and transparent association we can be, and it's best for you to let your members know where you stand. You can't be a successful chapter without the support of your membership. So if your chapter is maybe struggling a little bit, highlight that. Say, we need more member support. We need more member interaction. We need some members to step up to help lead the board. We need members to lead committees. We need people to get involved. We need your program attendants. Whatever you're dealing with, we can help you come up with some solutions in terms of how you present that to your membership. Anything else? Amanda, when you send out the email to the chapter leaders with the elections kit, can you include the CLC mentors and their email addresses, and or at least just mine, and then I can forward it on to their mentor?
Yes, I will do that.
Or mine and Karen, I should say.
Yep.
Perfect. We have 2 additional webinars already scheduled for September and October. In September, we're going to be focusing on exceptional education programs for 2020, how to plan phenomenal chapter programs, increase attendance, and attract members. We're going to give you guys some great speaker options. We are going to highlight the new national partner wedding industry speakers that Megan Ely has. And she also has one that is not wedding related. So if you're looking for something not wedding related, that is great as well. And then in October, we're going to talk to you guys about your board retreats. Some chapters are doing retreats later in the year. Some people do it after the first of the year. So we're going to help you guys plan some rockin' retreats, give you some resources, give you a sample retreat packet that one chapter uses for their retreats. If you guys would like to be a panelist on one of those 2 webinars, please reach out to me. We love to have chapter leaders really communicating with each other in terms of great ideas, especially when it comes to this exceptional education webinar in September. I really feel like that's a great opportunity for us to do some really great idea sharing. And we are going to review the chapter program starters that we all came up with at Evolve. Any questions before we finish? Thank you all so much for attending. It has been my pleasure to spend this last hour with you. And again, your CLC mentors are here for you with any questions. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we are more than happy to help you guys. And we hope this has been a beneficial resource for you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.